Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity in the Heart of Austin. I'm Debbie Sigrist, and I am your platform leader for the day. And we have the wonderful Leanne and Coleman Berg to sing today. And we also have Lara Hollers to give her talk today. And it's Emerging from the Wilderness. Emerging from the Wilderness. And today's music by Leanne Atherton and Coleman Berg. And we're so excited they're here. And Lara Hollers will be speaking, Emerging from the Wilderness. But first we'll have special music from Leanne Atherton.
Bring your heartache, bring your burden, lay them at the door. There is no fear, you belong here. Step into the house of the Lord.
Yes, I am Lara Hollers. I've spoken here with you all beautiful people before, so thank you for having me back. I'm excited to be here this morning talking about emerging from the wilderness. And when I say that term wilderness, what comes to mind for you? Sometimes we can see that as a beautiful oasis of trees and streams and rocks, and we feel nourished and fed. And other times when we think of wilderness, we may think of something desolate or barren or just parched, right? There's lots of ways you can define wilderness. Certainly Merriam-Webster has a lot of definitions, and a few of those mean empty, uncharted, uncultivated, and a bewildering situation. And certainly over the past few years, many of us have found ourselves in the wilderness, and some of us now in our communities, we're starting to emerge out of that wilderness, and we're different and we're changed. And along our spiritual journeys, especially, we've likely all encountered those distinct periods of being at the mountaintop, that yes, thank you, sweet Jesus moment of gratitude. And we found ourselves in those valleys of, oh, sweet Jesus, I need your help. I'm in this dark night of the soul and I don't know how to get out. And sometimes when we're in those highs and we're in those lows, we sort of know where we are. We kind of see those moments of truth as this is where I am. But it's oftentimes in those middle moments, that messy middle of life, where we're not sure. We're not sure how we landed where we landed. And most especially, we're not really sure how to emerge out on the other side. And that's when I tend to think of us, for the past few years, we've been sort of navigating this new space, this new territory, this new terrain for, I know for me over the past few years, that's meant meeting the love of my life and renovating 2 homes and getting laid off from a job and moving to a new job. There's been lots of change and transformation in the midst of this pandemic. And sometimes it's the hardest place to be in this middle place, though, because our lives are missing contrast. And so, we're at this place of journeying and trying to figure out where we belong. Just the other day, I was on Facebook and one of the memories popped up, and it was from exactly 2 years ago, right at the beginning of the lockdown. And it was a little meme, a little graphic that was black and white. And it said, when this is over, we may never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors, a crowded theater, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday. When this ends, we may find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hoped to be, and we may stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. And when I saw that, I just got tears in my eyes because it reminded me of those fearful moments 2 years ago when we didn't know. We didn't know when we were going to return to life. We didn't know when we were going to hear our neighbors in conversation. We didn't know anything. We were distanced and far away and trying to find toilet paper, or trying to find groceries, and how we've journeyed through this wilderness since then. So if you would for a moment, just close your eyes and drink in that idea. May we find that we have become more like the people we were called to be. I believe that the essence of this wilderness, you can come back to us, but I just invite you to sit with that through this, because that essence of the wilderness is answering the call of spirit. It is in that journeying of listening and being present to and awakening to our greatest potential. And it's really a question of, are you willing to become more of who you came here to be? Because in the sense of all of that has transpired, certainly all the personal changes that we've each gone through. I know for me, one of the things I'm still sort of grappling with and evolving into is, what does community mean for me now? What does it look like? You know, I'm sort of picking up the pieces professionally and personally to try to come back into life in a different way. In this wilderness, times can feel hard because they're disorienting. They stretch you to dig deeper. If you're familiar with Reverend Devenport, she is a Unity minister who wrote the book, Hell in the Hallway, Light at the Door. Over the years, Reverend Ellen and I have had several conversations about this hallway and what it really means to be in the middle of the hallway. And certainly those hallway moments are different for each of us, but the central theme of those is a sense of uncertainty. One door in our life has closed and the new one hasn't yet opened. So sometimes these doors that close are ones that you willingly shut yourself, that you say, I'm done with this and I'm moving into a new experience. Maybe that's leaving a relationship, stepping into a new job, moving to a new city, changing spiritual communities. And sometimes these doors were abruptly shut for us, right? The unexpected diagnosis, the unexpected moments of our lives that lead to an ending, and that new beginning hasn't yet emerged. And so that leads us to this first idea of emerging from the wilderness and what that really means. And certainly as I've contemplated this and I've been wrestling with these wilderness moments in my own spiritual journey, it's really come back to three core principles or steps that I see. The first one of those is acceptance, right? Being in that place of acceptance. Now, when I landed at Unity of Dallas in 2005, it was my very first Unity church. And in fact, Reverend Ellen Devenport was the senior minister there. And she talked a lot about acceptance. And I was like, I'm not so sure, right? I'm not so sure I really want to get into this idea of acceptance, because in my mind, it meant that I sort of had to fully take on things that I wasn't sure I wanted to take on. So I could never really fully wrap my mind and heart around why I would willingly accept something I didn't really want, especially if I was partly responsible for those moments. And especially too, because deep down in retrospect, the truth is I'd felt those taps. I'd felt those nudges from spirit saying, hey, might want to pay attention here. A change is coming. Something's happening. Wake up. There's a saying that God throws a pebble and then God throws a brick. And I don't know about you, but being a redheaded Scorpio who's a little stubborn, sometimes God has had to whack me upside the head with a 2x4 because I was unwilling to accept what was. And I think perhaps that's one of the reasons that this is one of the most profound lessons in the wilderness is, and can be so pivotal, is because acceptance isn't necessarily about giving up or giving in. It's actually about facing in this moment the reality of what is and taking responsibility for this in the ways that are appropriate for you. Because in that sense of responsibility, I've come to learn there is a space of freedom, because there's a space of ownership of, I have a sense of personal power here. I can choose. As part of this pandemic journey in meeting the love of my life, she came with a 5-year-old at the time who was 4, and now he's almost 6. And I've learned a lot about children in a very short amount of time. But one of the books that we read often is a little book about Danny. And Danny is a little boy, and it's one of those adventure books where you have to help Danny choose and make good choices. And teaching a kindergartner about the power to choose is also a great reflection for me in those moments where I realize I do have the power to choose. Danny has to make little choices throughout his day. And it's just a really great reminder that we can all simply adjust our lives choice by choice by choice, because we're always at choice all of the time. So we can choose to buckle down in fear, or we can choose to keep leveling up in love. In her book, Hell in the Hallway, Light at the Door, Reverend Ellen explains it this way. Whether you imagine that you are cooperating with God's plan for your life, carrying out your soul's purpose, or balancing the karma of past lives, all things do work together for good in the hallway if you allow it. The benefit is from consciously participating in the work of the hallway, taking responsibility for your experience and lessons while there, trusting that whatever needs to happen will happen, and then finally moving toward the next door. In these hallways, in the wilderness, it's really about that place of acceptance that maybe we do have more work to do. Maybe we feel like we've peeled that onion 1,000 times by now, but clearly there's still just a little more to heal, a little more to be aware of, a little more to forgive. And that really leads us to the second step, or second way out of the wilderness, and that's awareness. Now, sometimes awareness comes before the acceptance, and sometimes we have to accept where we are before we can fully be still enough to get the ideas and the lessons. I believe this place of awareness is about digging deeper. It's about leaning in. It's about being willing to awaken to the deeper spiritual truths and lessons that are up for us. This is, after all, I believe, the point of the wilderness in general. It's to keep expanding our consciousness and evolving who we think we are. Most of all, I think the awareness place in our journeys is in the midst of this no thingness. There is just that current of divine love that's expressing as us. We just so often forget. And so sometimes this place of the wilderness, I know, especially in my life, has been a place of deconstructing what I thought I was supposed to do, or who I thought I was supposed to be. So that means digging in and letting go of those old belief systems and being willing to move through those unhealed places. And I've come to also know the truth is that nothing really gets in the way as much as we do, especially from here to here, right? So we get in our own way of thinking of what's supposed to be or what's supposed to happen. And so in that space, we're constantly striving and trying. But leaning back into awareness in the midst of our wilderness is about we're leaning back into those moments where our faith is tested. I've had plenty of moments where I'm like, God, prove yourself to me, because I'm not believing right now. So there's a place where I think sometimes there is a divine space of anger, and it's okay, right? Because the point of the hero's journey that we're all on in our own respective lives is being in that place of doubt sometimes, of wondering if we have what it takes. But let me remind you that you do. You absolutely have what it takes. Everything is within you that you need to know for this place in your journey. As my favorite Peloton instructor says, you've made it through 100% of your bad days. It's such a simple little statement, but some mornings when everything's kind of going sideways, it's a great reminder that I do have what it takes within me to keep moving forward. Because just as the music that we hear, the guitar, the piano, just as the music is the sound that emerges between the notes, the miracles happen in between the spaces created in those moments of allowance, of being aware of the moment. Because no matter how brief, those pauses and those moments where we can just take a deep breath in spirit is where you realize that you're creating that space to move out of your stickiness, your muddiness, your stuckness from your wilderness moment. In Wayne Dyer's book, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life, he shares insights from a year-long journey that he studied the Tao Te Ching. It's a beautiful book. I took the cover off because I set it in my house, and I pick it up from time to time. But there's a place in here where he talks about the Tao truth is unprovable in physical terms. Wayne Dyer says, let go of your conditioned way of needing proof in the physical world before something becomes your truth. The Tao is hidden permanently and it cannot be named. So accept this as fact. You're not going to find it in material form. It has no boundaries. And the moment you try to name it, you've lost it. Just as modern scientists must accept the fact that quantum particles originate in waves of formless energy or spirit, without their ever seeing that infinite, all-creating field, so too can you let go of your need to see and touch the Tao before you can believe it. By changing the way you look at the world, you'll see a realm beyond the appearance of darkness, difficulty, weakness, indifference, and death. As the poet Rainer Murray Wilkie observed, behind the world, our names enclose is the nameless, our true archetype and home. Because I think in these times of our wilderness, that is where we're called, right? We're called back home. We're called back home into the essence of our truth in our hearts. And I think that's what leads us really to our third and final step of emerging from the wilderness, which is divine right action. So we've become more accepting, we've become more aware, and now we're taking divine action. This final step of emerging from the wilderness is perhaps the most profound, I believe, and meaningful, because timing is everything. Because when we act without first accepting what is, without being more deeply aware of how we arrived there, we can often find ourselves right back in those scenarios and patterns and situations that we once were in. And we're thinking, what has happened? How did I land here again? So we keep repeating the same journeys and having the same experiences over and over again. It was actually Wayne Dyer years ago who I heard. I was actually live here in Austin. I went at the Hay House, You Can Do It Summit. And I heard him tell a parable about a woman walking down the street and what she experienced. And this is actually something, as I dug in deeper, realized it's sometimes associated with the stages of recovery. And I think it beautifully illustrates this idea of taking aware, conscious action. In stage one, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. In stage two, I walk down the same street. There is a hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out.
I've got the story right here so we can catch up. Can we go? Because I want to know what happened. She walks down the same street, this chapter 2. She falls again, can't believe she's in the same place. It isn't her fault. Still takes a long time to get out. And then she walks down the same street. Here comes that deep hole in the sidewalk, and she sees it. She still falls in because it's a habit, but she opens her eyes and she knows where she is. She says, it is my fault. And she got out immediately. And then she walks down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. She walks around it. And then she walks down a different street, chooses a new way. So then we get to think, what chapter are we on in our life? Do we continually blame others for our mistakes that we continually do over and over and say it's not my fault? Or do we take that ownership? And then do we accept it, that we're in a dark hole? And do we take some responsibility and take our divine right action to get out of the hole, or to go a different way, to make a new choice? And yes, those are steps in recovery, as she was saying. So many of the acceptance, awareness, and action are also steps in recovery. And what recovery really means is coming to your heart and leaving your ego behind, is what I see it as.
Sorry about that. I guess it was just, too much energy. And it blew out my Zoom connection. So thank you, Leanne. You're absolutely right. I think those moments, I remember hearing that from Wayne Dyer years ago, and it stuck with me so often when I would find myself back in those same repeating moments in my own wilderness times. And so I think that as we emerge from the wilderness, it just requires of us to be willing to walk down a different street, taking that unfamiliar path, the higher road. And that's why the journey of navigating this uncertainty in these unfamiliar places, we must accept and allow, accept that we are guided, even when we cannot see it or feel it or know it in that moment, and allowing spirit to reveal to us what we most need to know, that being human, humble and being reverent, and that our way isn't perhaps working. So we can take action and put
Oh no.
and that we are loved and we are divinely supported. And so as we close, I just wanted to share a story that happened several years ago, about 10 years ago. In fact, I had been working for about 5 years for a copywriting agency in Dallas. I woke up one Sunday morning in early January and I got a call from my boss, and she let me know that because of financial hardship that she was laying me off. This was not how I planned to start my 2011. And I had no plan B. I had no real savings to speak of. So I was like, whoa, I mean, just this slamming door moment. Although in retrospect, I had heard sort of this murmuring and whispering for quite a while of maybe something's up. I think maybe I need to start looking for a new job, but I didn't. I ignored it in my, stubborn way. So it was one morning in mid-January when I finally got all the unemployment stuff in the works, and I was driving home from down 360, just at that intersection where you exit to get to 2222 so that I could go back home. I was just beside myself thinking, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for my rent and pay for my car and pay for anything. I was just really distraught. So I pull up to the intersection and I could see these guys out with their safety vests on, with their buckets, asking for money. And I got so mad seeing these guys out there. So I pull up and I got to the red light and I hear this tap at my window. And this beautiful man is standing there, and his beautiful smile, the sun pouring down on him. And before I can even really get the window down for him to say anything, I just say, I just came from the unemployment office. I don't even have any money. I don't know how I'm going to even pay my rent or I'm going to eat. I can't, I have nothing to give you. And he just smiles with this gracious smile, and in this thick Jamaican accent, he said, it's okay. Jesus loves you. He really, really do. And in that moment, my Jamaican Jesus, I just looked at him, the red light changed to green. I just said, thank you. And I couldn't even drive away before the tears started. And I think about that moment often, because in those times in our wilderness, there's always angels. There's always moments of grace that we're invited into if we're willing to receive them, if we're willing to lean in. And that idea of grace is what I think carries us through those times in the wilderness. I think we can all think back over the past 2 years and think of moments of grace. I felt like it was a moment of grace the day I walked back into Sprouts and there was actually produce in the section again. I never thought I would ever see a time in my life where I wouldn't have groceries in a grocery store. I literally wept when I saw the fresh produce, because I had such a place of fear of that our lives are forever changed, and our lives have been forever changed. And just like that Facebook message, I think that it's been a call to change for the better. So as we step forward into our weeks and into the rest of this month, as we head toward Easter and head toward this time of the light, of springing into a new realm of life, coming back together in community, sharing handshakes and hugs again, perhaps. It's a time of being in that grace and extending grace to one another, to allow ourselves to receive, to allow ourselves to be loved, to allow ourselves to be supported, and allow ourselves to be healed. And that is the energy that we will take into meditation this morning, is touching into that place of grace. And one of the ways that I often do that is through my breath and through the mantra Hamsa, or I am. I am is the greatest energy of all. Those two words, those 3 letters are the most powerful that we have to help shift our energy in those times of the wilderness, of when we're not sure how to step forward, of just leaning back in to your breath. So I invite you, wherever you are, Maybe put your feet on the floor, close your eyes. Come back into that deep divine breath within you. Go ahead and take that deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Leaning into that I am breath. Feeling that energy of aliveness coursing through your body. For in this moment, that breath of I am is the breath that breathes you right where you are. And in that I am breath, we have the potential in every moment, any moment, to shift, to accept what is, to make a new choice, to become more deeply aware of the power and the possibility of that Christ light that lives in each one of us. So I'd invite you to envision that Christ light as a light in your own heart. You can even see that light illuminating your heart, moving in through your chest, your torso, down through your legs, to your arms and into your head, up into the heavens, and spilling down through your feet. For in these times of uncertainty, these times of hope, these times of change, this light that lives in you and breathes through you is the constant source of I am, the constant stream of grace, the constant presence by which you are guided. And it can be as simple and as close as your very next breath. So I'd invite you just to breathe into that light, a few more deep breaths. And as you complete that cycle of breathing into that light, just wiggle your fingers and toes. And maybe say a prayer of gratitude for the wilderness moments in your life that have brought you higher, that have expanded your consciousness, that have expanded your life. You've made it through 100% of your bad days. And as God leads you and guides you in your constant state of truth, your constant state of grace, we honor this breath. We honor this truth. I am. You are. We can. So take one more deep, beautiful breath. And when you're ready, you can come back to our room.